Some places speak softly, but this one growls with truth. I'm Mr. J, and welcome to the J Spot Lounge, where justice sips whiskey and history spills tea. These walls, they don't just talk, they testify. And you didn't stumble in here by accident, you were summoned. You know, they say that critical race theory, or CRT, divides. But it's a division that's already been drawn in ink, made from policy and prejudice. They say CRT teaches hate, but Baldwin taught us that silence is complicit, that, quote, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced, unquote. Meritocracy? That's the velvet rope around privilege. And equal opportunity? More like equal erasure. And again, to quote Baldwin, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time, unquote. You see, they want history to be clean. But Baldwin said the root of evil is the inability of people to look at themselves. CRT doesn't rewrite history. It underlines the footnotes that America skipped over. And Baldwin, he's been the red pen all along. So tonight, we don't debate CRT, and we don't just explore it. We dissect why truth makes people tremble. We channel the ghost in the classroom, the voice in the margins, the fire in the footnotes. So welcome, peeps, to the J Spot Lounge, where justice doesn't whisper. She snaps her fingers and demands the mic. Let's get right to it, shall we? When you hear CRT and DEI, do you, like many people, brace yourselves? I mean, because the words alone seem to demand a side. That we pick a side, that we choose a side. But what if we pause the fight that is long enough to ask, what are we really talking about? You see, critical race theory, better known as CRT, started in law schools. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, better known as DEI, began as a way to make our institutions more just. These frameworks were not designed to divide. They were designed, however, to diagnose and to heal. So yeah, it's okay to critique them. After all, that is how ideas get sharper. But let's not reduce them to mere caricatures. And let's not confuse reform with radicalism, because this is not just about schools or companies or hospitals. It's about who gets to belong. And if we can hold space for disagreement without distortion, that is when we open the door to real understanding. And that, my friends, is not weakness. That is wisdom. Few concepts have stirred as much discourse and discord as critical race theory, also known as CRT, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, known also as DEI. Emerging from legal scholarship in the late 20th century, CRT interrogates how racial inequality is embedded in legal and societal systems. DEI, more recent in mainstream adoption, translates theory into practice by reshaping institutional culture to promote representation and access. These frameworks are not isolated phenomena. CRT provides the intellectual scaffolding for DEI initiatives, offering the analytical tools to diagnose systemic injustice. In turn, DEI operationalizes CRT's critiques, channeling them into policies, training programs, and cultural reform. Together, they reflect a broader effort to move beyond performative gestures and confront the enduring legacies of exclusion. Understanding their connection is not just a matter of academic interest. It is vital to parsing today's political flashpoints, workplace reforms, and educational debates. Now let's talk about the roots of critical race theory and the integrating power and racial structures that it addresses. Critical race theory was born out of frustration within legal academia in the 1970s and 1980s, as scholars like Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and Richard Delgado began to challenge the dominant narratives of colorblindness and incremental legal reform. They argued that racism is not simply an aberration, that it's embedded in the very fabric of legal and societal norms. CRT is built on several key tenets. First, as was mentioned, that racism is ordinary, not aberrational, and that it permeates everyday life and is often invisible to those not affected by it. Then there's interest convergence. Reforms benefiting marginalized groups tend to occur only when they also serve the interests of the dominant groups. Social construction of race argues that race is not biologically fixed, but shaped by social and political forces. And the value of experiential knowledge, that the lived experiences of people of color offer vital insights often excluded from dominant discourse. And finally, there's the critique of liberalism. Concepts like neutrality, meritocracy, and equal opportunity are often used to maintain existing power structures. These principles laid the intellectual foundation for DEI efforts, which seek to diagnose and to disrupt systemic inequities, not just in law, but also across education, business, and culture. Now let's take a minute to examine how those with a so-called dominant narrative got wind in their jaws about DEI and CRT. From the classroom to the Capitol, how the political controversy surrounding CRT and DEI was created. As CRT and DEI moved from academic circles into schools, corporate training programs, and public policy, they met resistance, not just from critics, but from legislatures and media influencers intent on framing them as threats. See, people who saw these initiatives as furthering the cause in a positive way for those on the margins, they began to try to frame them as threats and some type of reverse racism. What was once a niche legal theory became a national flashpoint, often distorted in public discourse to represent any effort that acknowledges systemic racism or promotes cultural awareness. And the opposition came in many forms. Legislative bans. Several U.S. states have passed or proposed laws prohibiting CRT-related content in classrooms, often conflating CRT with broader DEI practices. These measures claim to protect students from divisive concepts, but critics argue they suppress honest discussions about race, history, and equity. As I mentioned earlier, they want history to be clean, which means they want their hands to be clean of the nefarious actions and the criminal behavior that they displayed in the past. And then there's corporate pushback. Some organizations have scaled back DEI programs under pressure, as I said in the first video in this series, like Target, IBM, and Apple, worried about appearing political or alienating stakeholders. There again, goes back to the money. Yet others defend these efforts as vital to workplace fairness and innovation. And then there's the media narratives. Conservative commentators often portray CRT and DEI as ideologically driven attempts to rewrite history or enforce reverse discrimination. Interesting, that term, reverse discrimination. As if to say we're going backwards. Let our discrimination continue to go forward, but if we feel you're doing it to us, then we're going backwards. Meanwhile, progressive voices call these criticisms a smokescreen for maintaining the status quo. Underlying these tensions is a struggle over how society defines fairness, identity, and belonging. CRT's analytical tools challenge deeply rooted assumptions, while DEI's practical reforms bring those critiques into boardrooms and classrooms. This intersection makes them powerful and polarizing. And that polarization and that power led to a misunderstanding of the message. So now we'll talk about how CRT confusion fuels DEI resistance. The backlash against DEI programs often stems from a misunderstanding or a deliberate misrepresentation of critical race theory. As CRT has entered the public lexicon, its definition has been stretched, simplified, and weaponized. What began as an academic framework for analyzing systemic injustice is now frequently cited as a catch-all term for any initiative that acknowledges race, privilege, or equity. This conflation, as you would probably guess, has consequences. First, DEI programs are mischaracterized. Workshops on unconscious bias, recruitment strategies for underrepresented groups, or inclusive curriculum design are labeled CRT, despite having different origins or intentions. And it fuels public anxiety. Critics argue that these efforts promote division or shame, particularly among majority groups. The idea that DEI is anti-white or anti-merit is echoed in some political rhetoric, despite lacking support in the actual content of most programs. And then there's legal and institutional retreat. Schools, libraries, and corporations increasingly self-censor to avoid political scrutiny. Snowflakes. Some have removed DEI programming altogether, fearing public outcry or legislative backlash. The irony, you might ask? Many DEI efforts are not rooted directly in CRT, but they do echo its insights, especially the need to examine how entrenched systems produce unequal outcomes. Dismissing these initiatives based on caricatures of CRT undercuts meaningful work aimed at fairness, inclusion, and institutional accountability. The CRT DEI debate doesn't shape policy. It reshapes how entire sectors are perceived and are polarized and mythologized. Now let's unpack how this plays out in education, tech, and healthcare, and how each has become a cultural battleground and symbolic trope, which we will do in the next episode. As we close this chapter tonight, peeps, let's remember the debate over CRT and DEI isn't just about theories or policies. It's about people. It's about how we teach, work, heal, and more importantly, how we live together. In a world eager to simplify, these frameworks dare to ask the harder questions. And in doing so, they give us tools, not to just critique what is, but to imagine what could be. In the immortal words of Robert F. Kennedy, the late Robert F. Kennedy, some men see things as they are and ask why. I see things that never were and ask why not. So let's move beyond slogans and snapshots. Let's choose complexity. Let's choose possibility. And if you felt something shift tonight, well, that's good, because comfort is a currency of the powerful, and here we trade in truth. Till next time, keep asking who built the stage and who profits when the mic goes silent. Make sure you subscribe, like, stay sharp, and stay loud. I'm Mr. J, and you've been listening to the J Spot Lounge.